Today, a tragedy might be unfolding at this very moment, so I decided to record a quick improvised video to share my thoughts with you. A submarine carrying 5 people has gone missing off the coast of Canada. Since we built the manual Mundo submarine, people have tagged me everywhere, asking for my thoughts. There's a company called OceanGate that takes people on tours to see the Titanic wreck. Yes, it's a tiny submarine that descends to the Titanic wreckage. This trip costs $250,000. Yes, you heard that right. A trip that costs over $1 million Rs to dive to the bottom of the ocean and see the sunken Titanic. While building our submarine, I researched these expeditions and underwater tourism. I found a company and looked into the cost of going down there. It took me a while to process the price. I checked their website, and they're offering this trip for $250,000. Is that right? $250,000. Seriously? Coincidentally, we're recording today in parody, where we launched our submarine. So I want to give you an idea of what we will discuss. The Titanic sank in 1912 near Canada, about 373 miles off the coast, in an extremely deep and freezing area. The wreckage lies at a depth of approximately 3,800 meters. It's such an inaccessible place, so difficult to locate anything down there, that the Titanic was only discovered in 1985. And how does this tiny missing submarine work? It carries 5 people, a pilot, 3 tourists, and a Titanic specialist acting as a tour guide. It weighed 10.5 tons and was 6 meters and 70 centimeters long, making it slightly larger than a pickup truck. It could reach depths of 4,000 meters, slightly deeper than the Titanic. That's a bit concerning. If it kept descending past 4,000 meters, the whole structure might not withstand the pressure. It had 4 electric motors capable of reaching a speed of 2.5 miles per hour. The descent takes about 2 hours to give you an idea of how deep it is. This small submarine has been out of contact since Sunday. So what does it mean when we say it disappeared? It's no longer communicating with the surface, so no one knows exactly what happened or where it is. What is known is that it went out with the passengers to see the wreckage and never returned, and there's no news on its whereabouts. And this story is gaining even more attention because one of the passengers is an English billionaire who has already traveled to space and the South Pole. He paid over $1 million Rs for this trip to the bottom of the sea to see the Titanic. I didn't have this information when I recorded it in parody, but one of the people on board was OceanGate's chief executive officer. So some people say, oh, a scammer tricked the millionaires, but not exactly. But if the chief executive officer himself was inside the submersible, he must have believed it was safe. Another passenger was a French Titanic explorer, one of history's most experienced experts on the ship. There's a good chance these people are still alive, as the submarine had an air reserve lasting about 96 hours or 4 days. This means there's still much time left for search and rescue efforts. The problem is that several reports have surfaced, showing that this submarine was somewhat improvised and its design was questionable. For example, it was controlled using a device similar to a video game controller. Once people got inside, the hatch was closed and bolted from the outside. This means that even if it managed to reach the surface, the passengers couldn't exit on their own. Someone would have to open it from the outside. Reports indicate that the submarine lacked a global positioning system. Many commented, how could it leave without a global positioning system? But the global positioning system doesn't work underwater. Many submarines, ships, and aircraft rely on an inertial navigation system that doesn't depend on a global positioning system. So how does that work? You mark the position from where you started, and this system can calculate where you're moving. For example, if you're heading northwest, the system estimates your position based on the distance traveled from the starting point. However, it's unlikely that a submarine of this size would have such a system. While the global positioning system is useful when a submarine is at the surface, it becomes useless once it submerges. Underwater has to rely on sonar, a type of radar that works in water, so whether or not it had a global positioning system wouldn't have made a difference in locating itself. Its disappearance wasn't due to the lack of a global positioning system. Now, whether it had sonar or not, I don't know. I've been calling it a submarine, but technically it's a submersible. What's the difference? A submarine is designed to leave a port, operate independently, and return to port on its own. It doesn't rely on a mothership to transport it to the dive site. This small submersible, however, does. It has to be carried by a ship to the dive location, descend, and then return to the ship. Our submarine used a support boat to reach the dive site, but it could leave the port on its own without any issues. The only problem was that it would take too long. This submersible disappeared an hour and 45 minutes after leaving the ship. That's quite a long time after it detached. Their communication system was a kind of text messaging, allowing the submersible to exchange messages with the surface ship. I found that setup a bit odd. Numerous rescue teams are already at work. There are people searching for this submersible, but it's extremely difficult to locate. If it took so long to find the Titanic, imagine trying to locate a tiny capsule much smaller than the Titanic. The area is freezing, it's deep, and the Titanic wreckage is scattered across the ocean floor. This submersible was headed there, but wasn't exactly above the Titanic wreckage. It would have been easier to find if it had been directly above. There's a major complication. Military submarines exist precisely because they are extremely difficult to find. A submarine's greatest advantage in warfare is its ability to remain undetected, and finding one this small is even harder. That alone gives you an idea of how challenging this search type is. Another issue is that no one knows if the submersible is underwater or on the surface, so there's no clear idea of where to look. If it were on the surface, I'd imagine a small submersible like this would have some radio communication or a locator to indicate its position. But that's another strange thing. No one has mentioned it so far, so it probably doesn't have one. How is the search progressing? Planes are scanning the area, looking for any signs from above. But spotting it is extremely difficult because this type of vessel doesn't stay fully afloat. It barely sticks out of the water, and most of it remains submerged. It will only stay a little bit above, and it's incredibly hard to spot. There are also some sonars down there. Sonars can pick up sounds coming from the area. So, they might be trying a technique where they keep tapping on the hull to make a noise and be heard. These sonars can detect sounds from extreme depths. These sonars are not always inside ships. They can release floating sonars on the surface. Another method they use involves underwater drones that search the area, but visibility is minimal because there's no natural light. So they need artificial light to see, and artificial light has a limited range. A distance of 372 miles off Canada's coast may seem small, but I imagine a plane that has to go there. It has to travel 746 miles to go and come back, assuming it leaves from an airport that is exactly at the closest point on the coast. That's never going to happen. It'll depart from a bigger airport that's slightly farther away. So just what the plane spends on fuel to go and come back is already a lot. If we think about ships that are going to do this search, ships take hours and hours and hours to get to that place. They will linger there for a long time. It's incredibly challenging, but I noticed an issue that few are discussing. Even if this little submarine is found at the bottom and people are okay inside and everything, it's not easy to get this thing from the bottom. 1.86 miles and 800 meters is very deep, and few vehicles can reach that depth. Even military submarines can't reach that, not even if hell freezes over. Brazil's new Riachuelo-class submarines can dive to a maximum depth of 328 yards. Russia holds the world record for the deepest descent by a military submarine at 1,088 feet. It doesn't even reach a third of the way. And even if you have vehicles that go down there, what will you do with it? It's a challenge that I still don't know how they will solve. If you tie something underneath and pull, these air submarines are that strong. Attach an inflatable airbag to a cable and have a ship pull it, as the distance from the surface to the bottom is considerable. I don't know how the small submarine will be saved. The internet crowd is unforgiving. Many are drawing connections to the Manuel del Mundo submarine incident. This is a submarine whose ride cost 1 million reais and it sinks. Imagine what could have happened with the Manuel do Mundo submarine that was built in the Manuel do Mundo's garage. Our situation is different from this little submarine, and I will tell you 10 safety items in our submarine that made it extremely safe. First, we only went down 7 meters deep, and the floor was 7 meters deep. There was no way to pass the ocean floor. The submarine couldn't turn into an armadillo and go below that. There's ample light at that depth, and it's safe for everyone to go down. You could go down even by holding your nose and making an effort. The second essential safety feature of our submarine is that it was pressurized. What does that mean? As it descended, the pressure inside the cabin increased, equalizing with the outside pressure. This means the hull didn't need to be strong and heavy. With the pressure equalizing, there was practically no force on the hull. The third thing is that we could easily get out of our submarine. You saw everything else in the pool test. I could fill the submarine with water, equalize the pressure, open the hatch, and get out. There was this chance to evacuate. In this small submarine, they can't even open the hatch from the inside, let alone do anything like that. Because if it's 1.86 miles and 800 meters deep, the pressure is insane. No human being can survive under that pressure. It wouldn't even be possible to open the hatch, even if hell freezes over with that pressure. To give you an idea, 3,800 meters is about 380 times the atmospheric pressure. On top of all that, divers accompanied us. Someone was always next to the submarine observing my actions. I couldn't get lost. The water was clear, and the submarine was visible from the surface since it was shallow. So if you were on the boat, you could see the submarine below. We also had inflatable bags, which could be released at the front and back, filled with air, making the submarine rise. This could be a way to rescue a submarine lost near the Titanic. Our hatch was designed to open from both the inside and the outside, so I could get out, but if I needed to be rescued, a diver could also open the hatches without any problem. Another very important thing, which many people gave the wrong advice about, was that we should use Arduino or an electronic buoyancy control system. We didn't use any of that. There was nothing electronic in the submarine. To be honest, there was a small LED light that I controlled from the inside. So there was nothing that depended on batteries, chips, or anything. Everything was mechanical, based entirely on valves that we opened and closed. Have you ever seen a quarter-turn valve break? The valve works without breaking or letting water in, since there's nothing that can burn out or break. I don't know if you remember, but we even created an electromagnetic system to activate the engines, with electromagnets and everything. When we tested it in the pool, it was the only mechanism in the submarine that didn't work. The only failure that happened in the entire submarine, both in the pool and in the sea, was this mechanism. We didn't use the system in the sea because we replaced it with a mechanical device operated by cables. Despite some leakage, it worked perfectly. Our lead ballast was removable. So if we needed to remove weight from the submarine for it to rise, the divers just had to take out those lead bars and the submarine would float up. In addition to the oxygen I naturally carried inside the submarine, I also had a small emergency oxygen tank in case I needed to abandon the submarine to breathe. I've already mentioned 10 safety items, but I'll add one more bonus. On the outside, we had 2 crowbars. If anything went wrong, the divers could use the crowbars to forcibly open the hatch. But anyway, all this is just to say that in our submarine, we thought a lot about safety. We had a range of safety features that it seems this little submarine doesn't have because it's in a very different situation from ours. It's not necessarily that they weren't careful. We don't know how it works yet, whether it really had safety issues, whether a video game controller controlled it, and so on. I hope we soon find out that they locate this submarine with people alive inside and that it gets rescued. That way we can tell this story with a happy ending. If you've parachuted into this story and have never heard of our submarine, I'll leave the link to this video, which is cool. It was one of the best things we've ever done.